So often in life, you think you're all alone. You talk to yourself thinking no one is listening. You weep over things that tear at your feelings. You are sure that no one is there, so you confess your deepest, darkest secrets, even in times of joy. When you think you're alone, the truth is, if you're chosen, you're being watched every moment, stalked, waiting for the moment when you're completely vulnerable. How do I know this? Because I have been chosen. I don't know how or why they choose who they do. Sometimes it's good people, honest people. Other times they take bad people, people that no one mourns. I awoke very quietly from a deep sleep on Saturday. I had been out late Friday night with some friends from work. I laid perfectly still. I didn't move a single muscle. Slowly, I cracked my eyes open. There it was, directly above me. It was inches away from my face. Unsure if it was a dream, I laid perfectly still, eyes wide open. It looked like a dark, shadowy mass hanging from the ceiling of my room. The mass swirled randomly, but its face kept a solid form. As it slowly moved closer, inch by inch, I just stared at it, studying it. Its face was long and thin. Its eyes were gray with a hazing of white. I watched the swirling mass begin to form arms. Within seconds, there were large, grasping hands. With all my might, I sat up and screamed. The room seemed darker. I tried to adjust my eyes, but there was no change to the pitch black that surrounded me. With a swipe of my hand, I could see my closet door and the lamp on the nightstand next to the bed. Then, just like that, it was pitch black again. I frantically started waving my arms. The faster I waved, the more the mass dispersed. Suddenly, I felt like I was hit by a car. My body was thrown to the mattress. The pain was crippling. I just laid there watching the mass swirl randomly above me. The mass began to form a human shape as it grew from the arms and face. Within all my strength, I tried to push myself up. I looked to my side to see the edge of my mattress level with my face. The downward pressure was so great that my mattress had taken the shape of a bowl. The mattress springs popped from the force pushing on me. I could feel the barbs of the broken spring digging into my back. With my last breath, I whispered, "What do you want?" The face of the swirling mass became even more human-like as it moved closer and closer. "You," it said in a soft tone. Then it was like I could feel my strength being drained. Particles from the mass began to saturate my body. I could feel it inside me, like scalding hot water was racing through my veins. I instantly began to vomit. The entire contents of my stomach and some unrecognizable black squirming, like what looked like worms, shot out of my mouth like it was coming out of a fire hose. The vomiting became seizure-like. I fell to the floor and my body contorted in half the unnatural way. Then it went dark. I awoke standing in a pitch-black room. There were many people with me. I couldn't see them, but I could tell I was one of many in this place. I began pushing my way through this dark maze of people. No one said a word. One after another, I pushed my way through. I couldn't tell if they were men or women. I only know they stood shoulder to shoulder, completely silent in this pitch-black place. Just as I pushed one to the side, another would step in its place and say nothing. I couldn't find the strength to keep pushing my way through this, what I could only compare to trying to get to the stage on the main floor of a rock concert. The more I pushed, the more fatigue began to take over my body. Then the figures began to push into me with their bodies. I could feel hands pushing me in the opposite direction that I was trying to go. I was exhausted, and I wanted to just fall to the ground, but the figures were so close together. There was no room to fall. I just gave in. I didn't even feel my feet moving. It was like I was being handed from figure to figure. Then they were gone. I stood alone, feeling for anything. My arms swept through the air as I frantically walked in circles. There was no one there. I took about 3 more steps and banged into a wall. As I felt the wall, it was very smooth, like glass. My eyes were still useless in this darkness. Voices began to whisper in my ears. I tried to cover them to silence the whispers, but it had no effect. That's when I realized the voices, they were in my head. They kept repeating, "You were chosen. Now you must choose." I tried to ignore it, but it slowly wore me down. I pressed my back against the wall. The feel of smooth glass made me careful how hard I pushed. Finally, I turned around and put my face to the glass. Intently, I tried to focus in and out in hopes that maybe the glass was clear, or maybe it was a giant window. The endless dark and the repetitive chanting slowly began to gain control of me. That's when I broke in a soft voice and said, "I'll do whatever you want." The voices stopped. I closed my eyes tight, grabbed my head with both hands, and squeezed. I begged for it to be over. Slowly, I opened my eyes. With my head pressed to the glass wall, I could see a bedroom. The room was softly lit by a small lamp next to a bed. The room was not familiar to me. It was decorated like a guy would sleep there. Only a guy. Yet the furnishings seemed old, like late 70s. I placed my hand on the glass. It pushed through like I was pushing through jello. I could see my hand as it passed through the glass. On the other side, it was a small, swirling black mass. When I pulled my hand back to my side of the glass wall, it became whole again. Confused, I pushed my foot through the jello-like glass. Once again, on the other side, it swirled in the form of small black particles. Is this what was hovering over my bed? Was it someone like myself just trying to escape this place? Just then a man walked into the room. He walked toward the bed and kicked off his slippers. Then he walked up to me. He had a look of confusion on his face. I thought maybe he could see me. He stared for a moment, then he placed his hand on the glass. He stepped back and looked me up and down. Then he walked to the bed and lay down, closed his eyes, and drifted off to sleep. It was a mirror. I didn't get it at first. I began to try to follow the glass wall, or the inside of the mirror. It went on and on. At any point, I could stop, and my hand could push through, creating the swirling particles on the other side of the glass. I had walked a very long distance in one direction. I put my face against the glass, and to my amazement, I was still looking at the old man asleep in his bed. It was as if I was standing in the same spot I started at. Finally, I just caved. I closed my eyes, clenched my fists, and stepped through the glass. Immediately, I looked myself up and down. My human form had been replaced by the swirling black mass. Somehow I could see and sense my surroundings. I moved about the room in complete silence. I stood next to the old man's bed and watched. He was in a deep sleep and completely unaware of my presence. The whispers began to repeat in my head. "You have been chosen. Now you must choose." Now it was clear. The voices wanted me to pick the old man as my choice. I thought as I watched him sleep, I couldn't bring myself to do it. I slowly moved to the mirror and pushed through the jello-like feel. On the other side, I was whole again. I tried to move, but I couldn't. It was like every muscle was frozen. I stood facing the old man's room, unable to look away. I've named this place the Mirror's Realm. Here, time moves slowly, especially when you're not permitted to move. I watched the bedroom window brighten with the start of the morning. The old man woke and headed for the bathroom. Suddenly, still unable to move, I was watching him brush his teeth, mere inches from my face. It became clear I would watch his every move throughout the day. I had never considered how many mirrors surround us. From one mirror to another, I watched. Unable to even blink my eyes, this was my punishment, or maybe my motivator. Hour after hour, day after day, I just stood fighting to do what I knew was wrong. By this time, I had watched the old man enough to know almost everything about him. I had seen him with his friends, grandchildren, even a woman who seemed close to his age that acted like she had a fondness for him. The more I watched, the harder it was to do what I knew what was expected of me. I had often wished I would have taken him when I first saw him. Now, I'm sure it would have been easier. I knew if I didn't do it, I would be left to stand here forever. I couldn't watch any longer. Every new detail that used to make me feel sorry for him now made me want to just do what they wanted so I could get it over with. I knew it was time. Suddenly my body felt unrestricted. I stepped toward the back of the mirror. Apparently the voices in my head were listening. I placed my hands on the back of the mirror. It felt cold and damp. I began to lean forward. Slowly, I pushed through. On the other side, I could see myself in the mirror, not as I was, but as the dark swirling mass that hovered in my place. I moved around the room. The old man was laying in his bed. I didn't want to wake him. I hoped I could just take him while he slept. Then a voice softly said, "I know you're here, and I know why you're here." It was the old man. Then he said he'd been watching me. I couldn't understand how he knew. He said since he was a boy, he had been able to see the shadows imprisoned in the mirror. His wife had been chosen years ago. The night she was taken still haunts his sleep. He closed his eyes and said, "Do what you must. I can only hope my wife waits for me." I stared at the mirror. I wanted to go back. I couldn't understand why I was chosen to do this. He was a kind old man, undeserving of such a fate. Yet, I certainly didn't deserve this either. An unpleasant tone began to pierce my mind. It rapidly became deafening. The old man laid still like he didn't hear it. All at once, it stopped. The voices began to chant over and over. "The soul must be collected." The words echoed through me. I moved to the old man's bedside. The small black particles covered his body like a swarm of bees. He laid motionless. I could feel myself draining him. His eyes briefly opened. It was like a last glimpse. Then they slowly closed, and I knew it was over. I had moved to the mirror. This time I'm reluctant to go through. I have no idea what waits for me on the other side. The old man had a gift. He was able to look into the mirror and see what awaits on the other side. I have never been able to see such things. I've decided to leave a warning for others like me, those who have never seen the mirror's realm. I can only hope this may prepare you for what waits on the other side. All my life I have been told about heaven and hell. This is neither. Perhaps it's some sick form of purgatory. I don't know. Soon I'll know what waits for me on the other side. So hear my warning. When you look into the mirror, pray you're the only one looking back.